Hello YouTube. I've decided to once again try my hand at one of these sorts of videos. It's been a while, and to be honest, a lot of the content has been kind of dull in the very definition of just use whatever you want. However, I decided to dust off the pull plans video format and tweak it slightly. So this is when you pull. With FR and Shinryu, things work differently than they have in the past, so I want to give my thoughts and go over things you might want to know before making your choices on these banners, whether pulling or otherwise. This is not a should you pull or similar, because I don't believe that it's the best format for what I'm aiming for. My goal is to try and help people make more informed decisions for themselves, rather than simply parroting what they've read or seen online. Improving the discourse around fights and characters is always going to be good for the health of the game. And I often see folks say things like, well, I heard that X character is bad and falls off quickly, and you have to pull for Y because they're meta and you can't beat content without them, which has neither facts nor personal opinions behind it, and frankly, the game doesn't really function like that in Shinryu. I understand that not everyone wants to do a ton of research for fights and future viability of characters, but I am hoping to help people learn good habits when it comes to deciding whether or not to pull that are based more on fact than on hearsay. That being said, these are my thoughts, and as I want to encourage dialogue within the community, please leave a comment down below with what you think and with what your plans are. And as always, a like and a sub are hugely appreciated as they help spread the content around and are easy, free ways to help support the channel and help it grow. So, for this video, let's take a look at Raijin and Kadaj. We'll start with the man of the hour himself, Raijin. I'm going to totally ignore his regular skills, as you should always be using the plus version. The skill 1 has 5 HP attacks with refund between each, so it's probably his most reliable damage button. Skill 2 has 3 HP attacks, but has AoE brave hits, and is better if you need to shave all enemies. C65 now lasts 7 turns. Pretty good, all things considered, and it does increase Raijin's brave cap. He gets the usual updates for the EX, which has 4 HP attacks. The paralysis, HP plus gets 2, which isn't great, but it is now an instant free turn move, so it's not exactly hurting you too much either. I think the real news is in the passive stats he gets. He's got brave damage and brave gains up, overflow, the kind of usual suspects, but Raijin also gets a recast boost up for his EX, along with a pretty hefty speed increase. Now I imagine the recast rate is to compensate for that, but what it functionally means is that he won't be, slower than molasses when it comes to getting turns in order to proc those stuns, which is basically the whole reason why you're using him in the first place. The LD is a full AoE skill with 4 HP attacks, which does heal the party and converts the excess to battery, which is pretty nice. But what people really want is the 2-turn debuff that it inflicts, which is a huge but functionally pointless attack down, as well as 20% HP damage taken up, while rendering the enemy unable to do HP damage or land debuffs. Now this LD is phenomenally good. HP damage up is, kind of whatever. We've got that with Kurosame, Seymour, etc. But making enemy turns effectively useless is always a huge win. It's pretty similar to Reno's Pyramid debuff, except it has a duration, which is both a strength and a weakness for it. It can snuff 2 attacks, absolutely, but it ticks down regardless of what action the enemy takes. So if they waste their turn, buffing or whatever, you're still losing that duration. But that's also what makes it such an incredible call, because his call does inflict this debuff. You can use it preemptively, when a mechanic is coming, and you just ignore it. And this is really effective in Shinryu stages, where most of the time you're using this to protect yourself from incoming threshold attacks or mechanics that might kill your run. And because this will only decrease the duration, if the enemies get a turn, you can often trigger multiple thresholds back to back, assuming that you haven't outright finished the enemies off anyway. Overall, I think Raijin is still a pretty decent unit. His Damage is kind of lackluster at this point, but the utility that he brings is pretty incredible. HP regens, enchant, a heal that you'll never really use to heal, and some pretty easy to use stuns. That being said, I do think that he's probably better off as a call than he is in the party, particularly during Shinryu. It's relatively unlikely that you're going to be in a situation where you need to have that many stuns, especially, back to back. And if you do, it might be a better idea for you to try a different team for that stage. But if you are interested, he can be used with, your usual generalist FRs, along with any that require, some sort of thunder or melee damage, enemies to not act, HP regen. I know I'm huffing like Omega Copium at this point, but I kind of want to try him out with Desh, just to see if I can make Desh's FR condition more manageable. I really want him to be good again, but I recognize that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. Anyway, long story short, I would strongly suggest picking up Raijin's LD at the bare minimum for call purposes, which does maintain its usefulness to present-day JP. Keep this in your back pocket. Now, as for Khadaj, his rework here is pretty good. Both of his skills become triple HP attack moves with refunds, so he does hit a lot harder than he used to. He does get to start with his LD overhead, which is now granting a pretty sizable HP damage up based on how many stacks of it you have. And then the LD itself, the attack, the skill, has 6 HP attacks. It's pretty meaty. The C65 hits harder, lasts longer, and gives Brave Cap up. Pretty standard. He does just get the basic stat ups, nothing unusual there in his C85. But he does, however, get a free skill on his first turn, along with max EX gauge, so you can C65 a target and just start popping off immediately. The EX does now have 4 HP attacks, and then his follow-up is now a double tap, so his floor is a minimum 5 HP attacks per turn, which does go all the way up to 8 for his LD. So it's pretty good, honestly, especially with everything having refunds. But I think what I love the most here is that his Brave Steel debuff mechanic now takes 100% of any Brave gains from the enemy, so that they literally cannot gain Brave while the debuff is up. And I feel this really increases his utility against enemies with massive Brave gains, as instead of now only taking half of whatever huge attack they're going to do, you now take nothing instead, assuming that they don't do any Brave hits as well. Khadaj does still have the major weakness in being heavily keyed in on focusing one target at a time, and then needing his C65 to swap between them. And he is really reliant on Brave gains and refunds, as most of his buttons don't have that many Brave hits. He really does shine, though, in Transcendence 9, where he can basically solo handle the orb, and is probably your path of least resistance. Especially when you put him alongside like a counter unit, Galuf, Orin, something like that. I do believe you need to give him a Laguna Sphere for this, though, so do be mindful of that. Any debuff, like the extra debuff that he inflicts with that, will be gold framed as well. As for Shinryu, he really only triggers like debuff and melee FRs, so he's not got the most amazing lineup of pairs or anything like that. But like I said, his floor is 5 HP attacks per turn, which is pretty good, and he does work just fine with a lot of the generalist FRs. Thinking Aroha maybe. Alphano does have an awesome run of Kadaj in the Rydia mission dungeon stage that he posted just a few days ago, where Kadaj basically helps neuter the ability of the enemies to do much of anything, because they're really reliant on Brave gains. I'll put a link on the description, and if I can remember to do it, I'll put a card in the video right about now for that. As for the fight, I'm gonna be honest, I don't really remember much of it. You're up against Cerberus and Cypher, and they do turn warp at HP thresholds. I don't remember what they are. I do remember that Cypher does automatically drop debuffs, and I think his threshold attack is a guaranteed hit, which is AoE. I did look back, I ran Ramza, Layla, and Seymour for this, and it was pretty simple, even though I did a terrible job, and I tried the Anacro meme call for the BT phase. And of course, when not a single proc, but whatever. Anyway, Point is, prepare to heal for this one, and maybe bring like debuff immunity or cleansing or something like that. The orb is pretty simple. You do damage to Cerberus while it has an HP damage up debuff on it, which is pretty easy to handle by this point. For a change of pace, this time though, I think I'm going to try something like Seymour with maybe Rem and Anna Crow for real. I haven't used her that much, so I don't know. Maybe I'll try Charlotta. I don't know. Lots of options on this one. And that's it. Those are my thoughts on the upcoming units. Drop a comment and let me know what you think of the format, and if you're pulling here, and if you're not too. Like and subscribe for more content, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.